Chinese President Xi Jinping and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe met during the Eastern Economic Forum on Wednesday. What did they talk about, and will we see more meetings like this ahead? And the Trump administration has drawn the curtain on the Palestinian Liberation Organization's office in Washington, D.C. What's the next act in this ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine, and what role is the U.S. playing? Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. Chinese President Xi Jinping met Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Wednesday on the sidelines of the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russia. The latest summit is the seventh between Xi and Abe. President Xi expressed his sympathy for the casualties and property losses in Japan's Kansai area and Hokkaido, which were hit not long ago by a powerful typhoon and earthquake, respectively. The two leaders also focused on the Korean Peninsula and the East China Sea, saying the bilateral relationship is on the right orbit and the scope of cooperation is expanding. Japan and China will celebrate 40 years of a bilateral peace and friendship treaty in October this year, when Abe plans to make a landmark visit to Beijing. Abe also said during the meeting that he hopes Xi Jinping can come to Japan soon. So what would reciprocal visits by the two leaders, if they happen, mean for the two countries, and how far can bilateral ties go with differences on sensitive issues still dividing the two sides? Joining me for the discussion here in the Beijing studio is Professor Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies, and from Tokyo, Takesato Watanabe, Professor Emeritus at Doshisha University. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Professor Rong, let me start with you first. Now, President Xi told Abe that ties between the two sides are facing an important opportunity for improvement. Under the new circumstances, it is said, we should continue to meet each other halfway, maintain the positive momentum, and promote the stable development of China-Japan relations. What did he mean by these new circumstances?
Indeed, I think the China and Japan relationship is now entering a new era. We are facing a new circumstances. First of all, of course, the world we are living today has more uncertainties and unstable factors. I think President Xi during the meeting made it very clear China and Japan are the largest, the global economy and the major regional power. We have the shared responsibility to play a constructive role to ensure peace and stability and development of the region world at large. And if you look at the bilateral relationship per se, it has also been a new development. Particularly, I can since the last year and the last May by the Premier Li Keqiang's visit, the relationship has now back to the right track, and the two sides are working together to ensure that there will be the relationship will bring to a more solid and the momentum will be maintained. So I think there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of things China and Japan can work together bilaterally, in the regional context, and also in the globally.
Mm-hmm. Professor Watanabe, President Xi also stressed that the both sides should resolutely defend multilateralism, safeguard the free trading system and rules of the World Trade Organization to push for an open global economy. What's Japan's position on this issue? Being an ally of the United States, how can Japan stand firm on its economic interests and strategic interests as well vis-à-vis its neighbor China?
China is the second largest and Japan is the third largest economic entity. This is very clear that if those three countries are not connected friendly relations, it is very, very bad for the world. In addition, now you see President Xi pays very friendly, warm attention to the Japanese people and also to Japan, because Chinese people want to change the relations with Japan from the peaceful point of view. Japan must apologize to respond to these, you see, attitudes from China and also from Chinese government. Japan, unfortunately, Mr. Abe, Prime Minister Abe is now, you see, saying many good things. However, he doesn't want to be touched from the viewpoint of the historical points of the past deeds of Japanese militarism. Especially his grandfather was the top, you see, minister for colonizing China and Peninsula of Korea. So these are very complex. But on the occasion of this top meetings, people can support of Japan Prime Minister to change his understanding of the past.
Yeah. Professor Rong, concerning the historic issues, right, Japan's attitude towards history during the Second World War, what is China's position now at this moment? Is China ready to shelve those differences for the moment and to push on bilateral relationship, you know, to make it go further so that we can deal with these matters later, maybe?
Yeah, the question of the history, I think, is very much important and sensitive for the bilateral relationship. Look at 40 years ago, actually, we are celebrating the signing of the Treaty of Friendship and Good Neighborliness, and history is one of the important issues that facing the two countries 40 years ago remains so and today. And China's position has been very clear that history should be the mirror, and we, of course, we have to look ahead toward the future, and only that is hope. That is always being repeatedly whenever during the meetings at the different levels. And this time, as President Xi also mentioned, and Prime Minister Abe also, I think, reiterated his position that it would uphold the spirits of the four political documents, and Japanese positions on these issues, including history, remain unchanged, which is good. But of course, I think still there are some elements in Japanese society, particularly the right wings, kept on doing, provoking these issues. Well, I hope that Japan, the Japanese side, particularly the leaders, would continue to uphold these positions.
Yeah, but both sides, I think, believe at this moment that these differences must not prevent them from moving forward. And let me go back to Professor Watanabe. We know that Japan invested heavily in China since the early days of China's reform and opening up. Actually, 40 years ago in 1978, the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping's idea of opening up was also very much inspired by his visit to modern Japanese enterprises. Now, during this meeting, Abe said, with increasing space of bilateral cooperation, Japan hopes to establish a closer relation with China to achieve common development and prosperity. In what areas, Professor Watanabe, are the two sides complementary to each other, given the current circumstances in our economic developments?
Japan is a very small country in geographically speaking. China is so, you see, the big country, and it has a very big areas. So we must, you see, develop the relations between the two from the broader point of view, not only between China and Japan, but how, you see, Japan and China can contribute to the development of economy and the political, you say, security, stability for the other Asian nations named Road and Belt, you see, initiative proposed by China. So if Japan can join this program fairly well without, you see, any, you see, hindrance of the historical past, full understanding of the, you see, the meaning of that, Japan and China can help with each other without big problems. This is the hope for China and Japan, also, you see, including the partner of Japan, United States, and also for the peaceful, you see, security of Korean Peninsula. These seem to be very complicated but simple. You see, all the countries should be prosperous economically, and stability of politics, and also the united, you see, the world.
I understand your point. Indeed, Professor Rong, we have actually heard news, although Japan was reluctant to join this initiative, but latest reports from the Japanese media say that officials from China and Japan are actually working together to cooperate to build a mass transit system project in Thailand. Although on the surface, Japan is not using the name Belt and Road, but many people are saying actually this is what they're actually doing. They're already part of the initiative. How does China look at Japan's participation? How important is it for bilateral ties?
Yeah, I think China attached great importance to that, and really is looking forward to working with Japan for kind of a so-called third-party cooperation, which literally I think is becoming now a new area and a new sort of bright point for cooperation. And it is true, I think, if Japanese position toward the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, taken the process from a kind of resistance or reservation to a now more sort of positive and more sort of constructive. I think in this regard, the business community has played a very important role. During the last visit by Premier Li Keqiang in May this year, there's agreement that the two sides would work together with the business community supported by the government, and they've already established a kind of mechanism to work on that. And during this visit, President Xi and Prime Minister Abe also made it very clear they will continue to pursue that, making it a new area and a new sort of a testing ground for the deepening of the practical cooperation between China and Japan.
According to a very recent article by Japan's Consul General in Shanghai, the Consul General said that Japan needs to understand a changing China objectively and cool-headedly. So, Professor Watanabe, what is the level of understanding among the Japanese politicians and the general public towards a rising China right next door? Has Japan fully grasped the new reality that China is a bigger economy?
General public of Japan are fairly, you see, on the high level to understand the neighboring nations. But the people are okay, but politicians is the problem, because the people doesn't support Prime Minister Abe's idea of the social matters inside Japan. More than, you see, 60% they don't support Mr. Abe because Mr. Abe is not so honest to the people. Frankly speaking, this is true. All the, you see, the surveys tell like that. However, politicians of the Japanese Congress, especially inside, you see, LDP, leading party supporting Mr. Abe, nearly 85 or even 90% of them are supporting Mr. Abe. This is a contradiction between the wills of the people and the real status quo of the supporting ratio of the politicians. This is a very serious problem inside Japan now. Another point is that Mr. Abe wants to go to the very colorful, you see, stage like the summit only, but actually, you see, the other more serious things are remain as they are.
Okay.
This is a very serious dilemma for Japanese people.
Okay. Professor Rong, very briefly, what needs to be done in terms of promoting people-to-people understanding and also helping stabilize relationship between China and Japan?
And certainly, I think the principles that are being embodied in their four political documents, including the Treaty of Friendship and Good Neighborhood, has to be upheld. And this is the most important thing because it touches upon the political foundation of the relationship. But equally important is the people-to-people interactions. We have seen that in the past few years, China, and there are more visitors, China, particularly from the Chinese side to Japan, which raise the question of how that would be play in that role in playing deepening the relationship, understanding, mutual understanding, which touch upon the foundation of the social and political foundation of the relationship. And I think President Xi again made it very clear, which should get new contents and making point that we have carried forward the fine tradition of people-to-people friendship between Chinese and Japanese.
Okay, Professor Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Relations, and Takesato Watanabe, Professor Emeritus at Doshisha University. You have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, the latest roadblock on the Middle East path to peace. The U.S. closes the Palestinian missions office in Washington, D.C. What's the grand plan and what's next? Stay with us. The Trump administration is shutting down the Palestine Liberation Organization's office in Washington, D.C., or PLO. White House National Security Advisor John Bolton made the announcement on Monday, accusing the PLO of not taking steps to advance the start of direct and meaningful negotiations with Israel. The order is just the latest in a series of controversial moves the U.S. has taken against Palestine, including moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in May, and last month canceling more than $200 million in aid for projects in the West Bank and Gaza, as well as cutting off funding to the UN agency that helps Palestinian refugees around the Middle East called UNRWA. Why has the Trump administration unleashed a chain of inflammatory actions now? How will this latest blow affect the Palestinian people? And how will the U.S.'s decisions shape the peace process in the region? Joining me for the discussion in Beijing is Professor He Wenping, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. In Tel Aviv, Meir Javdan-Far, a Middle East analyst, and in Philadelphia, U.S., Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, founder of Grasshopper Strategies. Welcome to all of you. First, let's listen to the reaction from the PLO Secretary General to this news.
But how can anyone in their sane mind, with all these American decisions, Trump's decisions, believe that these people can be honest brokers, facilitators, arbitrators in any peace process? They are no longer partners in the peace process.
So let's start the discussion. Professor He, now you've got the Trump administration taking both financial and political actions against Palestine, especially over the last month. What message is the Trump administration trying to send, and why the series of bold moves right now?
Of course, the message is very clear. They want to give the further pressure to the Palestinian side, trying to move them, push them to negotiate with Israel, and also bring the United States on the, to the table. Because we all know after the last December, when this Trump administration made this embassy, U.S. embassy, move from Tel Aviv to the Jerusalem, and then the Palestinian side has made clear, saying the United States administration now no longer capable of serving as the mediator because they are so biased with Israel. But now, you know, the Trump administration saying they want, first of all, because this decision followed with those ICC, International Criminal Court, also want to show this U.S. those you know, politicians or decision makers about the war towards Iraq and Afghanistan. So this decision, you know, the timing is very tricky because exactly one day before this 9/11. So to make this news, one purpose is trying to divert attention from the ICC, from international media, to rethink about this Iraqi war, because this war caused a lot of casualty. And the second purpose, of course, trying to push the Palestinians to the corner, saying all those deadlock of this negotiation is not caused by the United States, it's caused by the Palestinians. So just give those claims to those Palestinian side.
Mr. Blackburn-Dwyer, do you think President Trump is playing this to his base before the midterm elections in November, or is there something else going on here?
Frankly, that's probably the only plausible explanation for why he's decided to double down or triple down or quadruple down on his moves that are wildly anti-Palestinian. You can say that they are supportive of Israel and the Jewish interests, and on some level they are, but the reality is Mr. Trump, since coming into power, has systematically taken moves to remove the United States as a mediator. The unilateral decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem undermined faith in a two-state or even a one-state process that a cornerstone of it has always considered to be local, meaning Palestinian and Israeli decision on the future of Jerusalem. With the United States just saying, you know what, we're going to go ahead and just decide that Jerusalem's the capital, that really undermines their ability to be a mediator. Then you have cutting of aid over the last year substantially to Palestinians. You have really the last straw of another $25 million being cut at the same time that he announces the PLO office being closed. The Trump administration has demonstrated a wild misunderstanding of the situation and really a belief that if they bully Palestinians, that's going to bring them to the table. And all they're doing is pushing them farther and farther away from the table.
The PLO Secretary General Dr. Saif Erekat has said that the latest move was, quote-unquote, yet another affirmation of the Trump administration's policy to collectively punish the Palestinian people, including by cutting financial support for humanitarian services, including health and education. So, Mr. Jabdanfar, do you agree with this saying? And Dr. Erekat also said that the move is a dangerous escalation. What do you call it?
Well, yes, I would call it, if I'm a Palestinian, definitely would call it an escalation, especially as an Israeli. I don't understand why they've cut the funding for a Palestinian hospital, to be quite frank, where they were treating Palestinian cancer patients. Look, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have their own motivations. They want to force Mr. Mahmoud Abbas to the table. Soon, there's going to be a new peace plan by the Americans regarding the Palestine-Israel issue. And basically, Trump is laying the law of the land. He's basically playing sheriff. He's saying, either you accept my proposal, or what has happened to you, you should expect worse things to happen. So, you know, this is the situation right now. And just to complement why President Trump is doing this, if I may, there are two reasons. One is suspected to be that we are approaching the 25th anniversary of the Oslo peace process, which was started by the late Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat. And also, I have to say, in terms of U.S. politics, why he's doing it, let's not forget that more than 50 million U.S. evangelicals most of them are active supporters of President Trump. Majority of U.S. Jews are not even Republican, they're Democrats. So with President Trump increasingly in hot water because of domestic issues, I think such a move to back Israel, which the evangelicals support very, very strongly, will basically secure his base at this very sensitive time in U.S. politics.
What would be the significance, Professor He Wenping, of this closure for Israel? And last year, the U.S. also warned the Palestinian leaders that they would shut the diplomatic mission if more progress wasn't made. Could the PLO, have done more to prevent this from happening?
Unfortunately, I think there's not too much that the PLO can do at these circumstances, because we all know in the past 1 year also, Trump administration had made already very close ties, not only with Israel and also with Saudi and also with Egypt in the whole Middle East area. So with all those very tight contact with those very key players in the Middle East, and it seems to make the Palestinian side now no longer has a very strong backup, especially from the Egypt. So that's why I think this gives the very clear reason for the Trump administration can make this bold step forward, saying move the embassy, U.S. embassy, all the way from the Tel Aviv to the Jerusalem, because simply he believes there is no strong supporter for the Palestinian side. So Palestine even themselves, made a very strong protest about this embassy move, but simply couldn't generate it more concern and more focus even among the international media. So now I think it's a very unfortunate issue. They couldn't, even though they send a lot of delegation to all, all of the world, but unfortunately now this issue has been marginalized.
Yeah, it's a great sense of helplessness there. Mr. Blackburn Dwyer, the Trump administration also cut $25 million in aid for 6 hospitals in East Jerusalem that helped Palestinians, and this was announced on Monday. So the head of the East Jerusalem hospital network warned that the decision to cut funding put the health of 5 million Palestinians at risk. So could the Trump administration have conveyed the same message without doing so much damage to civilians?
Absolutely. If the Trump administration wanted to keep this political, they could have shut the PLO office. That would have been a pretty big signal. It's one that they've been threatening to do. It's one that arguably is justifiable under the Oslo Accords that require the PLO office to be actively engaging in peace talks, which they have not been doing since the United States moved the embassy to Jerusalem. So they would be justified in that. But taking it out on the people, taking it out specifically on one of the last remaining sources of aid from the United States to literally directly to the people and their health is outrageous. President Trump is bullying people that are sick. He is bullying cancer patients. He is bullying people that are legitimately innocent in this process to score political points at home and to look tough, all of which is going to end in more death, more sickness, and not a successful peace process.
Yeah, Mr. Javdanfar, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders reiterated to reporters on Monday that the Trump administration remained very much committed to advancing an Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. So do we have any evidence to see this kind of commitment? Is there a Trump plan on the peace talk coming out anytime soon?
Look, you know, if President Trump was a property dealer, he prides himself in art of the deal. He even wrote a book on how to negotiate. I think he overplayed his hand already. If he would have put a good deal on the tables and the Palestinians had turned it down, and then he would have imposed these measures, then it would have had more, it would have made, at least in terms of negotiations, it would have made some kind of sense, because you know, he could have used it as leverage. But to use the leverage now, even before we've seen what the deal looks like, this really hurts the position of the United States as a honest peace broker. Look, as an Israeli, I'm very happy that he has moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I'm very happy that we have a president of the United States who's backing us. But it's how you back somebody, you know. The PLO, I think it's very important for your viewers in China and for the entire world to know that Israel and PLO have fantastic security cooperation. One of the reasons why we've seen the number of terror attacks brought to almost zero in the West Bank is because of our security cooperation. And now what we are saying is that President Trump is punishing them. Meanwhile, Hamas, which is a terrorist anti-Semitic organization which has been threatening the lives of many Israelis, unlike the PLO, we are now going to reach a deal with them to build a port in Gaza. What kind of a message does that send to Palestinians? That basically if you work with Israel, you're punished, and if you fight Israel, you're rewarded.
Okay. We have to leave it there. Time is up. Many thanks to our three guests, Professor He Wenping, Senior Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in Beijing, Mayor Javdanfar, Middle East Analyst in Tel Aviv, and Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, founder of Grasshopper Strategies, joining us from Philadelphia, the U.S. And that is it for this edition of The Point with Mili Shein. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.